It's here. We have a trailer for Masters of the Air. If you're not familiar with it, you'd best get familiar with it. So most of us are familiar with Band of Brothers, that fantastic HBO series based on real people in Easy Company of the 506th Parachute Infantry in World War II. Came out in 2001. That was followed up by The Pacific, which followed the stories of several Marines in the Pacific Theater. And now we get kind of the third part to the trilogy. This is Masters of the Air, which is going to tell the air war story from the battle over Europe. So a little bit of background on this, and then we're going to watch the trailer, and I might try to break down a couple of things. Not a lot we can pull out of the trailer, but there's some things that we can talk about from this, and I'll give a little bit of history after we're done watching the trailer about some of the units that are going to be portrayed in this. I did watch the trailer once, but now I'm ready to watch it with all of you. So Masters of the Air is going to be 9 episodes coming out in late January. So it's going to air January through March. I think 2 episodes come out the first weekend or the first day that it comes out, and then 1 episode a week after that for 8 weeks. Austin Butler, of course, is the big star of this thing. He's best known now as playing Elvis Presley in the movie, the biopic that came out recently. So we're going to see him featured heavily in the trailer because he is the star. For the most part, these, though, are actors that are not going to be real familiar to a lot of people, which is good because it helps with the believability of it, right? Because they become those people easier than if we had a bunch of Tom Hankses and things like that in there. So there are some familiar faces, but not overly familiar. So let's just go ahead and watch this, and I'll pause a couple of times here and there just to point out a few things that I see or that I notice, but I'm not going to break down every single frame of this. So the link is in the description if you want to watch it without my commentary.
When you look at it, you don't pay attention to what's really going on. It's kind of beautiful.
So not only the executive producers, Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, who produced Band of Brothers in the Pacific, but also I believe John Orloff is one of the main writers, and he was one of the writers for Band of Brothers as well. So keeping a lot of the same team together, which I think is a good thing.
We came from every corner of the country with a common purpose.
Go, 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 go!
To bring the war to Hitler's doorstep.
So these are B-17s, and they're called flying fortresses for a reason, because these things could absolutely take a beating, lose chunks of the plane, and still keep flying. It was really quite something. Now, a lot of them didn't make it. In fact, there are some missions. The unit that is... So this is based on a book called Masters of the Air. And the book is about the 100th, I think it's the 100th Bombardment Wing. Let me double check that because I want to make sure that I get that right. It's the 100th Air Refueling Wing today, but in World War II, they were known as the 100th Bombardment Wing, Bombardment Group, Heavy. And typically when you see that 100th Bombardment Group and then you see Heavy afterwards, that usually means, at least in Europe, that they were probably B-17s. My wife's grandfather was in the 379th Bomb Group Heavy, and they flew B-17s. So the 100th is known as the Bloody 100th because of the losses that they suffered. In fact, they had one mission where they only had one plane come back. And there was a while there where more of their pilots were being lost than were surviving to 25 missions, which was kind of what you were aiming for. But these B-17s could take a beating.
These daylight missions. It's suicide.
So he mentions the daylight missions are suicide. See, initially when the 8th Air Force, which is kind of the primary air force that's bombing Germany and bombing Western Europe, they started out with night missions. Night missions are great for protecting your crew because it's much harder to hit a bomber at night. It's much harder for fighters, your Messerschmitts and things like that, to go up and shoot down B-17s at night. But it's also much harder to hit your targets at night. So January of 43, the 8th Air Force starts running daylight missions, which are much more effective but much more dangerous for the crew. Now, the 100th Bombardment Group didn't even start operating in Europe until like the summer of 43. So 8th Air Force had been long doing daytime missions before these guys even got there. Doesn't mean that they started out doing daylight missions. I don't really know.
And watch them move.
We lead our boys through it.
What these guys went through is just, it's really hard to really kind of grasp how difficult this must have been. Being up there, I mean, especially like my wife's grandfather was a ball turret gunner, hanging on the bottom of that thing. I mean, you're just out there, and you get a big group of fighters coming at you, and you're fighting them off. Sure, your plane may stay intact, but it might be filled with holes, and there are men inside those planes getting filled with holes too. So this is cool here because we see what appears to be Tuskegee Airmen. The Red Tails, if you've ever seen the movie Red Tails, it's about the Tuskegee Airmen. These are the first black American pilots to fly for the United States. There was at least one black American pilot in the First World War, but he flew for the French. It wasn't until World War II that you get black pilots fighting for the United States. And like many stories of these men who served, they had kind of an uphill battle, even in terms of getting good equipment and things like that. But they very often flew escort missions for these bombing runs. That's probably what we're seeing there. I'm glad they included that.
We're getting through this. Even if the
We saw a little clip there of a guy in the woods fighting a German. You know, if these guys got shot down and were forced to bail out, a lot of times they were bailing out into German-occupied territory, and a lot of them ended up as prisoners of war or ended up kind of in the countryside hoping for help from resistance movements and things like that to try and get to safety.
It's stacked against us.
Dang. Oh, it looks so
First
good.
time in the sawmill, boys. Let's rack them up and knock them down.
Oh, I'm really excited about it. Yeah, so I want to talk real quick about the real life unit. I pulled it up here beforehand. Their very first combat mission with the 8th Air Force was the bombing of U-boat yards in Bremen. And it was the beginning of the Bloody Hundredth's legacy. It's a name they have to this day. The group focused its bombing attacks against German airfields, industries, and naval facilities in France, Germany, Poland, the Netherlands, Norway, Romania, and Ukraine. They were flying pretty far for some of these missions. They inherited the Bloody Hundredth nickname from other bomb groups due to the number of losses they took from the summer to fall of 43. This is when they first got there. For example, only 4 of the original 38 co-pilots assigned to the group completed their assigned 25 missions. Let me read that again. Of the original 38 co-pilots assigned to the group, only 4 completed their assigned 25 mission tour. And there were several instances where the group lost nearly a dozen aircraft on a single mission. That's crazy. On one such raid on October 10th, 1943, the 100th made on Munster, they ended up with only one surviving B-17, the Royal Flush, commanded for this mission by Robert Rosenthal, that returned safely. So they operated up until, it looks like, the oil campaign of the summer of 1944 approached. They flew their last combat mission on the 20th of April, 1945. And were deactivated in December of 45 like a lot of other units were. They do exist today as an air refueling wing that is actually stationed in the UK at RAF Mildenhall. The only modern U.S. Air Force operational wing allowed to display on its assigned aircraft the tail code of its World War II predecessor. It says here the 379th Bomb Wing used the Triangle K until activated in 1993. I keep mentioning it, but this is my family connection, right? My wife's family was, her grandfather was in the 379th Bomb Group, and they had that K on their tail. Same unit that Charlie Brown was a part of. Charlie Brown, who was in that, flying that B-17 that was escorted by the German pilot, Franz Stigler, back to safety. So that's that. And then, of course, here's the Tuskegee Airmen. We saw real quickly one of the Tuskegee Airmen's planes in one of those scenes. So I'm expecting we're going to see them portrayed in this as well, which I think is a nice touch. Especially, I'm hoping there were some real instances where those guys were flying escort for these guys. I know a lot of them operated in Italy and stuff like that, but I have no reason to think they didn't operate with the 100th. So if not, it's still good to be able to tell their story in there. So let me know your thoughts. Did you see something in the trailer that I didn't mention that we should talk about? Anything in particular you're looking forward to in seeing this? I'm pretty excited about it, and I hope you are too. Like I said, check out the link in the description to the trailer if you haven't already seen it. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.